Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I hope that you are doing well. This is a fortnightly lecture, which is a combination of weekly lecture number 4 and number 5. Here are the contents: culture, definition of culture, cultural context, culture and society, social and cultural development, biological factors, geographical factors, prosperities of culture, main categories of culture, material culture, non-material culture. Some of the key terms that we expect you to be familiar with at the end of this lecture: culture, material culture, non-material or immaterial culture, manifest function, latent function, identity, social characteristics, status symbol, social system, ethnocentrism, xenocentrism, popular culture, subculture, cultural change, globalization. We begin with our lecture. Culture is extremely important, one of the most expanded areas of interest and study in all the social sciences, not only sociology. So I expect that you please pay attention. I have tried to include the essentials into this fortnightly lecture, and I would like you to go through every single line of these notes. Humans are social creatures. We are born in human social groups and live all our life within this social world around us. Unlike animals, we are not purely and only instinct driven. We have the ability to learn, adopt, and create. This cognitive ability is unique to humans, as we can modify our behavior by learning. Every human society has a set of ideas, concepts, values, and patterns of approved and disapproved behavior. This whole mechanism of what to do and what not constitute culture. It is culture that explains the answer to basic human problems on how to live and why to live together. I repeat, on how to live and why to live together. There cannot be any human society without a culture. The other way around, we may also say that it is society, the broadest human social group, which creates, grows, and flourishes and transmits culture. It is society which creates, grows, and flourishes and transmits culture. But the question is, why to have society that bears a distinct culture? It is because we have to satisfy our basic human social needs. In terms of American sociologist Talcott Parson, we can understand this in an easier and simpler manner. It tells us how cultures develop and why they develop in a particular way. Talcott argues that all societies are faced with solving four great problems if they are to exist and survive. If they are to exist and survive, they need to have an answer to these four basic problems. The four great problems are economic, political, family, culture. If we would just go through the problem statement of them, the economic problem of have to produce the things that are needed for human survival. Have to produce the things that are needed for human survival. The political problem of have to ensure that society is orderly and stable, to enforce rules of acceptable behavior, where there is rule of law, peace, security, and justice prevail so that humans won't have to live like animals. The family problem of have to ensure that children are born and looked after in a manner to turn them into socially positive and dynamic beings that would live and let others live in a conducive environment of peaceful and productive coexistence. The fourth one, the cultural problem of have to make people feel that they have things in common with other people. The creation, maintenance, and development of this we feeling. Thus, it is culture that provides us with a roadmap to grow from this I to we. It is culture of any society and every society which gives us solution to these basic human problems and ensures that society exists and survives. As we went through, so this is a diagram of the basic human problems: economic, political, family, and culture. Now, why to have a culture and society at all? So, society, through its cultural framework, tries to find or provide solution to these problems as under. Economic, society has to organize people into economic work relationships in order to produce things like food, shelter, and so forth. Political, society has to develop ways of governing people and controlling people. In our society, this involves government, the police, the courts, and so forth. Adult society has to develop ways of ensuring that babies and children are raised in ways that allow them to learn culture of the society into which they were born. Because culture is acquired after our birth, and this process of acquisition and socialization continues all along the life. The development and encouragement of cultural relationships involving things like religion, education, the mass media, and so forth. To conclude, human behavior is organized in terms of a system of relationship called social system or society. The four problems that we discussed: economic, political, family, and culture, we call them subsystems. These subsystems and their solutions are interlinked. They are not independent. No society can flourish without finding a reasonable solution to these problems. In terms of sociology, these four problems and their solution provide us basic organizing principles of all human societies. I repeat, this is the paragraph line. In terms of sociology, these four problems and their solution provide us basic organizing principles of all human societies. Now, the manifestation: humans are unique in that even twins have distinct differences. As we live in social groups, so we choose to live our individual lives in the presence of others and to live among and fit in, to live among and fit in with others, to be part of the group. We have to give up some aspect of our individuality. We have, in other words, to stop thinking as an individual what's best for me and start thinking as part of a group, that is, what's best for us. So that's a switch from me to us. And in this idea, we can see how to resolve the tension between the individual on the one hand and the society on the other. It is culture, as a way of life that we carve out of this living in groups or living in a social life. Naitu and Bod define culture as consisting of the values, traditions, worldview, and social and political relationships created, shared, and transformed by a group of people bound together by a common history, geographic location, language, social class, religion, and other shared identity. While this sounds rather complex, we can think about it in the following way. People see themselves as having things in common, such as where they live or religious beliefs. These things help to bind them as a group. Groups develop certain relationships as being family members, employees, or teachers. These relationships express the things people value, their beliefs about the world, worldview, and the like. Here are a couple of useful definitions. These are for your academic reference only. There's no such single comprehensive definition that would do with sociology or culture. All I want you is to go through them and try to develop your own perspective of it. Try to broaden your own encompassing of, or try to broaden your own grasp of this subject, the comprehension of this subject or title. The ideas and physical objects or things that represent a group or society. Culture consists of patterns, explicit and implicit, of and for behavior, acquired and transmitted by symbols, constituting the distinctive achievement of human groups, including their embodiments and artifacts. The essential core of culture consists of traditional, historically derived and selected ideas, and especially their attached values. Culture systems may, on the one hand, be considered as parts of action, on the other, as conditioning elements of further action. Whereas a society is composed of people, a culture is composed of ideas, behavior, and material possessions. Society and culture are interdependent, neither could exist without the other. Culture is a kind of knowledge, not behavior. It is in people's heads. It is in people's heads. It reflects the mental categories they learn from others as they grow up. It helps them generate behavior and interpret what they experience. At the moment of birth, we lack a culture. We don't yet have a system of beliefs, knowledge, and patterns of customary behavior. But from that moment until we die, each of us participates in a kind of universal schooling that teaches us our native culture. That's the process or course of socialization, primary or secondary or later, laughing and smiling are generic responses, but as infants, we soon learn when to smile, when to laugh, and even how to laugh. We also inherit the potential to cry, but we must learn our cultural rules for when crying is appropriate and when it is not, of course. Sociology understands culture as the languages, customs, beliefs, rules, arts, knowledge, and collective identities and memories developed by members of all social groups that make their social environments meaningful. Dimensions of culture. Initially, culture have two dimensions, material and immaterial. Immaterial is also called symbolic. Immaterial culture consists of the knowledge, beliefs, and values that influence people's behavior. In our culture, for example, behavior may be influenced by religious beliefs such as those of Islam, Christianity, or Buddhism, and or scientific beliefs. Your view of human development, for example, has probably been influenced by Darwin's theories of evolution. In addition, your knowledge of microbial diseases that modifies your behavior from time to time is based on germ theory. Immaterial culture consists of the physical things, artifacts produced by a society, such as cars, mobile phones, and books. These reflect levels of culture, knowledge, aptitudes, skills, interests, and preoccupations. Examples of immaterial and material culture. Immaterial culture, beliefs, values, rules, norms, morals, languages, organizations, and institutions. Material culture, homes, neighborhoods, cities, schools, mosques, and other places of worship, offices, factories and plants, tools, means of production, goods and products, stores, and so forth. These dimensions are, of course, closely related. First, material culture is created by and from non material culture. The mobile phone had to be invented, and this required a range of cultural knowledge. Second, physical artifacts have cultural meanings for the people who produce and use them. They have, in short, symbolic significance. It may not be enough just to have a mobile phone. It may be necessary to have the latest, most up-to-date mobile on the market. This leads us towards the idea that our culture provides us with something more than just things to use. It's not just using the things. It gives us a range of attributes that shape both how we think about and behave in society. Being born and raised in a particular culture doesn't just give us a certain standard of life. It also equips us with cultural ideas and attributes. Community, history, identity, and language. These ideas lead us to three further aspects of culture: transmission, change, and variation. I would encourage you to go through them. Elements of culture. In the broadest sense, we may say that every human society has five essential constituents of its culture: symbols, languages, values, beliefs, and norms. Symbols or anything that conveys a particular meaning recognized by people who share the same culture. Symbols can attribute to religion, beliefs, national esteem, or anything that a particular people may have. For example, these are the symbols for mosque, Red Cross and Crescent, Chelsea, Football Club, and McDonald's, respectively. Language is a system of communication through symbols with sounds and words carrying meanings that allows people to communicate with one another. Values are typified patterns of behavior that validate whether a particular action is right or not in a particular time. These are standards shared by members of a culture and used to judge whether behavior is right or wrong. Beliefs are statements that people hold to be true. They are more specific than values in their nature. Norms are the kinds of behavior that a society expects of its members in particular situations. Norms can further be divided on the basis of their intensity and observational adherence into mores and folkways. Mores are widely observed and carry more of a sense of what is right or wrong. Folkways are norms of routine, casual social interactions. Norms that are widely accepted and continue over times are sometimes called customs. In addition, some norms are given extra weight by being used as the basis of rules, regulations, and laws. Norms are usually enforced by informal means, laws by formal means. That's the real difference. The aforementioned elements of culture, particularly norms, provide us with status, role, and identity. These are the elements of culture as well. For example, your status in this lecture is that of a sociology student, while mine is teacher. But we have other statuses too. We are members of our families, religious groups, and political and economic groups where we have a number of other statuses. In your family, your status is of a son or daughter or brother, sister. Role is the patterns of behavior expected of someone because of their status in society, a particular status, in fact. The role of a student includes norms such as attending classes, asking questions, and learning. Students are expected to sit at a desk and listen to what the teacher says. Our role is like a script to follow in a play, but it is one that gives you some choice over how you act it out. This is what really matters. How you act it out. The script is there, but it is up to you and me how we act it out. The nature and extent of your performance matters and varies from individual to individual. You may do that better, normal, or bad in a particular role defined by a particular status. You may do better in some and not do so in others. It all depends on a number of variables that begin with you but do not necessarily end with you. Functions of culture. In terms of Fisher, culture is shared behavior that systematizes the way people do things, thus avoiding confusion and allowing cooperation so that groups of people can accomplish what no single individual could do alone. Similarly, Missouri has identified 7 functions that culture performs for both societies and individuals. Communication, culture provides the context for the development of human communication systems, such as language, both verbal and nonverbal gestures, for example, perceptions. Culture gives meaning to social situations, generating social roles and normative behaviors. In other words, it shapes how we see and understand the social and natural worlds. Identity, culture influences how people see themselves and others in terms of ideas like gender, age, and ethnicity. Durkheim, for example, suggested societies have a functional requirement to develop 2 things: social solidarity and social integration. Now, social solidarity, the belief we are connected into a large network of people who share certain beliefs, identities, and commitments to each other. For such feelings of solidarity to develop, however, societies must create mechanisms of social integration. A feeling of commitment to others, such as family and friends, is needed to create a sense of individual and cultural purpose and cohesion. In a general sense, collective ceremonies such as royal weddings and funerals, in which we can all share, and collective identifications. Value systems, cultural institutions are a source of values, and people's behavior is, at the very least, conditioned by the cultural values they receive through the socialization process. Motivation, it relates to the idea cultural values and norms involve sanctions, rewards, and punishments for particular behaviors. Cultural values also set the behavioral boundaries in terms of maintaining certain standards of behavior. Laws, for example, specify behavior that is right or wrong, acceptable and unacceptable. Stratification, all cultures develop ways of differentiating between social groups on the basis of things like social class, economic divisions, social rank, political divisions involving ideas like an aristocracy and peasantry, gender, age, and the like. Social stratification is inevitable, necessary, and functional because it generates the incentives system required to motivate and reward the best qualified people for occupying the most important positions within a culture system. Production and consumption, culture defines what people need, use, and value as part of the overall survival mechanism in any society. People need, for example, to be organized and motivated to work. Hence, the need for a stratification system that offers rewards to those who occupy social roles. Biological and geographical factors of culture. This is more popularly called the nature versus nurture debate. Proponents of the nature side of the debate maintain that human genetics creates cultural forms common to people everywhere. Genetic mutations and anomalies then give rise to the behavioral and cultural differences encountered across and among human groups. These differences potentially include language, food and clothing preferences, and sexual attitudes, to name just a few of them. Proponents of the nurture side of the debate maintain that humans are a tabula rasa, that's French for blank slate, upon which everything is learned, including cultural norms. This fundamental debate has given social scientists and others insights into human nature and culture, but no solid conclusion. Today, sociologists generally endorse social learning theory to explain the emergence of culture. That is, they believe that specific behaviors result from social factors that activate physiological predispositions rather than from heredity and instincts, which are biologically fixed patterns of behavior. Because humans are social beings, they learn their behaviors and beliefs, attitudes, preferences, and the like within a particular culture. Sociologists find evidence from this social learning position when studying cultural universals or features common to all cultures. Although most societies do share some common elements, sociologists have failed to identify a universal human nature that should theoretically produce identical cultures everywhere. Among other things, language, preference for certain types of food, division of labor, methods of socialization, rules of governance, and a system of religion represent typical cultural features across societies. Yet, all these are general rather than specific features of culture. For example, all people consume food of one type or another, but some groups eat insects while others do not. What one culture accepts as normal may vary considerably from what another culture accepts. Types of culture. Every culture is in fact a complex and dynamic overlap of various subcultures that have fluid boundaries and yet distinctive features of their own. Every subculture must have two main characteristics: distinctiveness and identity. Now what's distinctiveness? Members share a distinctive set of rules, values, and norms that are different in some way from those shared by the cultural majority. In our society, for example, we can identify a wide range of different subcultural groups such as football supporters, train spotters, and medical students. Identity. Members have a sense of their own subcultural identity. That is, individual members partly define themselves in terms of their group memberships. I am a medical student, for example, while also defining themselves in terms of wider cultural connections such as family memberships. Sociologically, subcultural groups generally conform to one of the two types: reactive or oppositional, and independent. Now, a reactive subculture, a particular group of people come together as a reactive subculture when they develop norms and values that are both a response to and opposition against the prevailing norms and values of a wider culture. In other words, this kind of subculture develops when a group reacts to the actions of some other cultural group. An independent subculture group forms around a particular set of shared interests. Classical examples are hobby or leisure groups such as train spotters, joggers, or dog owners. Group norms and values reflect the focus of the group's interest and will necessarily be different from those of the wider cultural context. Youth subculture, when young adults develop a certain subculture that is typical in terms of their preferences for food, dress, and music, etc. Almost all human societies have their distinct youth subculture that might turn into fierce and reactionary nature at times. However, it is not essentially reactionary in nature. Global culture. The idea of cultural globalization relates to the free and rapid movement around the globe of different cultural ideas, styles, and products that can be picked up, discarded, and most importantly, adopted to fit the needs of different cultural groups. The variety of available cultural products, both material and non material, is vast, and people are no longer restricted to local or national cultural choices. High culture. This involves the idea that some cultural products and practices are superior to others. Classical music, opera, the works of Shakespeare, and so forth are high cultural forms, whereas pop music, cinema, and the works of Rowling, like Harry Potter, or Stephanie, like Twilight, are not. As Gans puts it, high culture relates to the art, music, literature, and other symbolic products that were and are preferred by the well educated elite, as well as the styles of thought and feelings of those who choose these products, those who are cultured. Popular culture, it is entertainment created for large audiences such as popular films, shows, music, videos, and TV programs, the very opposite of what we just studied, high or elite culture. It is the culture of the masses, a term often used in a disparaging way to suggest a culture that is shallow, worthless, and disposable. Popular culture is, however, a wide-ranging concept. It takes in vast range of cultural ideas and products, and we can examine it using two contrasting viewpoints: critical and progressive. Consumer culture. Consumption involves ideas about how we shop, where our purchasing needs come from, how we treat the products we buy, and how consuming shapes our lives. The slogan, "I shop, therefore I am," neatly captures the flavor of the relationship between consumption, culture, and identity. Now, these are some of the key terms like culture, beliefs, values, norms, social interactions, customs, laws, status, roles, social institution, social identity, gender, stereotype, and so on. We would like you to go through them and have a practice over them. Take care of yourselves, stay home, and stay safe. Assalamu alaikum.